We have with us today a mystery guest speaker, and I have to tell you, it's not because we wanted it to be a mystery, it's because we were coerced into doing so by the law of the land. This is a man who has done more for alternative currencies and foundation work than just about anybody else on the planet, and he has suffered greatly for it, both personally, financially, and in just about every other way you can imagine. This is a man who has been characterized by the federal government as a unique type of domestic terrorist. Now, there's 4 laws on the books that tell you what a terrorist is, and all of those relate to violence. And he's unique because he's entirely nonviolent, and all of his work has followed that path of nonviolence in creating an alternative currency that took the United States by storm a decade before Bitcoin became popular. I give you Bernard von Nothaus, the creator of the Liberty Dollar.
I'm almost speechless. I did have some notes because in talking to people over the beers and dinners and everything else, I kept being asked a lot of questions. So what I want to do is breeze through a few housekeeping sort of issues and then really open the floor to mostly questions and answers, because I was out on tour for 10 years and I found that the most enjoyable and fulfilling part of that tour was answering people's questions. Since I'm not psychic, it's the way it happens. So first, before Joseph introduced me, I'd like to have a quick show of hands of who's heard about the Liberty Dollar before just now. Wow, really? Wow, and you came back for more, huh? Okay, I'm glad about that. I need to give you a disclaimer, and that is that because of my conviction, I'm out on an appearance bond, and I'm barred from selling any Liberty Dollars, or promoting Liberty Dollars, or marketing Liberty Dollars. I can breathe the word, but I can't do anything with them. So I just want you to understand, I know this is being recorded, that I'm not here to do any of those sort of things because I don't want to violate my appearance bond. I don't want to go to jail, period. Okay, so with that clear point in mind, I think probably the best thing to do is to give you a real quick outline for those that didn't hold up your hands. The Liberty Dollar dates back actually 40 years ago. On September the 11th, 1974, I experienced an epiphany that resulted in me writing 200 pages of automatic writing. You can look that up and Google it. And an outgrowth of that was an economic research paper to no value. Outgrowth of that was starting the first mint in Hawaii. And I served there as the mint master for all of 25 years. And that was my day job. That's what put me on Diamond Head and gave me a nice lifestyle, 2 children, and telly. But during that time, I had a burning desire going back to the epiphany and the revelations that I experienced there that could be boiled down to simply when there is a loss of value in the economic, political, or economic system, there is an equal and corresponding loss of value in those other systems. And certainly in 1974, we were seeing this, gas lines and the hostage. It was a bad year. But in any case, I was driven to research monetary issues, money in particular. I've always liked money. I think money is good. Kind of sounded like DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. I kept researching, reading, and working on developing a currency that would be based on gold and silver. There's a lot of history for that. Gold and silver have been around 4,000 years, gave us the greatest prosperity the country's ever known, the world's ever known. The gold standard has been extremely good for the working class man and for the rich class too. I mean, everybody profited. Exactly the opposite of what we have today. Anyway, so over that 25 years, I developed this currency in, well, let's see, 1991, Paul Glover brought out the Ithaca Hour, and it was the first community currency. Paul had a lot of good intentions, but he didn't have any money, and so he didn't back it up with gold and silver, so it was a fiat community currency. For me, that didn't make it. I didn't like it, so I continued my work, but it was a warning shot across the bow that I needed to get my act in gear. Later on, 1995, Judy Shelton, a very well-known economist, wrote a book called Monetary Meltdown, and that was another shot across the bow. Beth Deiser, the editor of Current World, wrote a flaming article about the advantages of community currencies against government fiat money. So I really felt under pressure, you know. I said, God, I really got going here. I mean, these guys are passing me by, but they don't have the model. And God, I think we're looking for a monetary collapse. And what the hell are we going to do if we don't have any money? So in 1998, I brought out the Liberty Dollar. And I'll have to say that there's two major factors for its success. One was the internet. There was no way in hell that anybody, even with really deep, deep pockets, could possibly introduce a new currency without the internet. Because how would I find one monetary activist, for lack of a better description, over here in Iowa, and maybe two in California, and somebody up in New York, or down here in Miami? It was, I mean, this was 16 years ago, folks. There was not a lot of action happening in the monetary world at that time. There weren't any other choices. So the internet came along at ideal time. It was fantastic. It gave us the exposure because there's no way to be able to find critical mass. Of course, the other thing that was the biggest help, was the government. The government was really supportive. A lot of times people ask me, wow, Bernard, you know, what's the government think? We read them off a long list of really great statements saying that it was legal and there was no law against it and things like that. I mean, we had a lot of confirmation from the government. Of course, that made the people that were on the fence a lot more comfortable knowing that, wow, this is really legal, much like what we're talking about in Bitcoin forums here. So with those two things, I went sailing off to just an extremely warm reception that kept growing. We're talking about rate of adoption. Of course, we never had that phrase back then because, duh, there wasn't anything to adopt, you know. But rate of adoption was doubling every year. I forget what it was the first year, but by 2008, which was the 10th anniversary, we were doing 5 million a year or something like that. So we started out just one or two people, and then it doubled and doubled and doubled, and it was fantastic. And really, we didn't have any marketing plan. We didn't spend a lot of money on marketing. Didn't have a lot of money for marketing. Basically, it was me driving around in my fat silver Cadillac, talking to people about how the government money is bad, how bad it is, and saying that Liberty Dollars, you notice I can't hold anything up here, folks, how good the Liberty Dollar was. And people just, they fell in love with it. Okay, so history. So we started in 98. That was good. We had some good years there. And then in 06, the U.S. Mint put out a warning saying that use, not possession, distribution, or sales, but use of the Liberty Dollar was illegal. Well, that wasn't a good thing. We tried to get them to claim that by filing a declaratory judgment, but that didn't get past the government's courts. So that didn't work. Then in 07 came the big bombshells when they raided the warehouse and raided the office, confiscated a total of about 11 tons of gold and silver and some copper and some platinum, but mostly gold and silver, 11 tons. That was a lot. To give you an idea what that looks like, if you know what a pallet looks like, you know, a skid, 4 foot by 4 foot, 15 feet high is what that looks like. That was a lot. And that was bad because that backed up the paper and the digital currency. Shortly after that, 2 years after that, 09, I was arrested. I self-reported. You know, it's the civilized thing to do. They call you, and would you come in and turn yourself in? I said, yeah, of course. You know, what am I going to do, right? You know, you get a request like that, you really don't deny it. But they did want me to come in right away, and I explained to him that it was late in the afternoon, I was on the road, and what am I going to do? Get there and cool my heels, in a cell overnight? I said, it'd cramp my clothes, it'd wrinkle my clothes. I said, I'll come in tomorrow morning. Nice to argue with the FBI. So I was arrested, and I was released, and 2 years later, I was tried. The trial took 8 days. The jury took less than 2 hours and convicted me on all 3 counts of counterfeiting, fraud, and conspiracy. The chief, and I use this word in the broadest context, expert that the government had stood up and said that the Liberty Dollar, and you have to go online to see what I'm talking about, looked like a U.S. quarter. I kid you not. Now, I don't know if you've seen quarters recently, but they have a guy on them. Liberty Dollars have a woman on them. The government doesn't have any $5 denominations. I mean, there's any case. I won't plead my case here because the case before the court, still before the court, because what's happened after I was convicted, usually when you're convicted, you do a pre-sentencing and you go in and you get sentenced, and you're in federal prison about within 60 days is about the average. I was convicted on March the 18th, 2011. This is now 2014. It's been 3 years since I was convicted, and I still haven't gone to federal prison. Now, don't interpret that I'm anxious to go to federal prison. Although they do tell you that if you're going to do time, do federal time. That's comforting, don't you think? Any case, I don't know exactly what's happening with my case. We have motions before the court asking for an acquittal or a new trial. I think acquittal would be a good thing. But that hasn't happened yet, and I don't know when that's going to happen because I've been waiting every day. What is it? 3 years is over 1,000 days. I keep going, well, maybe today is going to be the day, And, of course, it could be just get notification of come in for my sentencing, and after all this waiting around, I could maybe be thrown in jail. We just don't know. Let me take a look at a couple things I wanted to mention to you. I think the biggest point is the 2 driving forces behind the Liberty Dollar, which I think plays really quite well to a lot of the speakers that I heard here at the conference. And one is that there's something morally wrong with a government that rips off the people by their phony baloney fiat money. If I held you up, it would be a crime. If the government holds you up, they call it inflation. I call it bullshit. This is... We shouldn't be losing our purchasing power. When you want to go back and you look at value in currency, just think in your mind about what the price of gasoline was when you started driving. I'm 70, so I can tell you it was about 25 cents a gallon when I was starting to drive. And I had some really great times. There's nothing like being young and having a lot of money and driving around. But anyway, gas was 25 cents a gallon. So at that time, you could take in a fiat Federal Reserve note and you could get a silver dollar for it, and that was pretty cool. Now, a silver dollar was about 3/4 of an ounce. Now, I could buy 4 gallons of gas with that dollar. Well, that 3/4 of an ounce of silver today still buys 4 gallons of gas. It kind of tells you something. It isn't the fact that the price of metals are going up. It's the fact that the purchasing power of the dollar is going down. And anything that you can do to protect that, Bitcoin's included, of course, is good. And you have to. You can't possibly go through your life thinking you're not going to get old and you're not going to have any money. It's a very bad combination. I'm both old and I don't have any money. I could say it's not a good combination. So you don't want to follow me at all. I don't imagine any of you would follow me. But then again, you wouldn't be the mint master for 25 years and all that other stuff either. So the other thing is my concern about society in general. My concern is that we're looking for a collapse of the economy. That was my concern 25 years ago. Actually, it was my concern 40 years ago when I wrote my first economic research paper. And it remains my concern today. If you look back on what happens when the government hyperinflates the dollar or hyperinflates the currency, it is nothing but bad news, and the consequences are severe. And if you want to look at another example, Matter of fact, only one other example is when the whole global economy, at least the global at that time, failed. It was a total disruption of society, civilization in general. What would that case be? When Rome hyperinflated their denarius into oblivion, much like our favorite U.S. government is doing today, and it failed. All you have to do is think about the next 500 years, which were known as the Dark Ages. Yeah, they were dark, all right. They didn't have any money. People didn't have enough to eat. Next 500 years, they romanticized it as medieval. Oh, that was wonderful. Why? Well, because by this time, 500 years, that's 33 generations. I mean, that's a lot of people. I mean, that's a long time. The next 500 years, by this time, society had been driven to estates, and people were living on people's property, and they were sharecroppers, basically, and they had enough to eat, and that's why that was romanticized. That was good compared to the previous 500 years. And we had the next 500 years, which we're at the end of right now. God knows where we're going, but you've got to protect your money, and that's what I strive to do with the Liberty Dollar. A Liberty Dollar was nonprofit. I wasn't in it for the money. I made a bunch at the Royal Hawaiian Mint, and I used that money for what I thought was a good cause. Obviously, it was too good. A couple statistics for you. The Liberty Dollar was initially issued at a $10 face value when silver was about $5 an ounce. That's pretty understandable. You got markup and you got distribution costs, and actually we distributed it at $7.50 if you bought it in bulk. So that was $2.50 that we squeezed out of every one of the little pieces of silver. So that wasn't a whole lot of juice there. Silver moved up, so Liberty Dollar moved up to the $20 base, and then it moved up some more, moved up to the $50 base. So what happened? Well, that meant that the Liberty Dollar increased by 500%. This was wonderful. You know, when people bought the 10s and we moved up to the 20, they turned them in. They got 20s in place of the 10s. They doubled their money. Boy, we didn't have any trouble making that sale. People were ranting and raving and lining up and flooding us with Liberty Dollars to get reminted. Thing is that it appreciated 500%. Almost sounds like Bitcoin sometimes, huh? And then, at the same time, those same 10 years, Bushwhacker in the White House, he decimated the dollar, and it lost 50% of its purchasing power. The 1913 dollar had already depreciated down, so we only had 4%. Bushwhack drove it down to 98%, okay, of the purchasing power of the 1913 dollar. And so if you average those two together, the overall differential between private, voluntary currency versus government, fiat, was 1,000% difference. Why did the government come after me? It could have been either just too popular, too successful, too noisy. I don't know. We were having a great time.
This is Chris Joseph bringing you news on Next, the first true second-generation cryptocurrency for February 11th, 2014. The Next software is now into its 0.7 version, which features completely refactored code and a new method for storing local blockchain data. The current release also features a fix for a cryptographic bug uncovered by Jesse James, the same person who found errors in blockchain.info in August of last year. Today is also the day that Next's decentralized asset exchange is released for public testing. Built on the foundation of the colored coins concept, the Asset Exchange lets Next users issue and trade assets tied to any other commodity, including Bitcoin. For more info, head to nextcrypto.org or mynxt.org. And stay tuned for more news on Next in the next Let's Talk Bitcoin broadcast.